Greetings, I'm Paul Friedman, founder of the Marriage Foundation. Our topic today is fight for my marriage or walk away. Greetings, I'm Paul Friedman. Welcome back. Walk away or fight for my marriage? That's the question. And this is a question that comes to us all the time. You're not the first one. And I'm going to try and help you see through all the clutter so that you can make a really good decision. So let's take it point by point. Fighting for your marriage, first of all, doesn't mean talking to your husband or your wife and saying, hey, we need to fight for our marriage. Because the reason your marriage is off track isn't because of what he or she has done or what you have done. I know it's easy to blame somebody and to say, you should have, I should have. But the truth is that in our society, there's no good training for marriage. Now, some churches do the very best they can and they set up courses, but they talk about very practical things, but they really don't talk about the essence of marriage. And I'm going to talk about that with you first, because you need to understand what wasn't happening and what happened. What happens is we get married in our society as if we're getting on a ride at a theme park. There is no consideration for, okay, how do we make this marriage last and last? Instead, for most people, there's a romantic notion that everything's going to work out. Because unlike everyone else, we're so much in love. Well, everyone has that aspiration. But that's like saying, wow, I really love this car, and you never got any driver training. And so you get into the car and you don't even know how to turn it on. You don't know how to turn on the heater. You figure out the radio pretty quick, but you don't understand what you're trying to achieve. So in marriage, you get married actually, not because you fell in love. That was the incentive. But because you want to be happy, right? I mean, why else get married? And so we don't even think in those terms. And so we don't think in terms of how do I make my marriage happier? And your marriage has descended. In fact, the second book that I wrote is called Breaking the Cycle, because it becomes a cycle of annoying each other and bothering each other and not taking care of each other that worsens and worsens until you reach this point. So let's do a checklist. Number one on this checklist, and don't think I'm preaching at you, but the truth of the matter is that this is an important point. If you have children, and most of you who are watching this do have children, so if you don't, please hang in there because it's the only time we're going to talk about kids. If you have children, the world, because marriage counseling has failed to really resurrect and help marriages, think about it. The divorce rate is 52% now. When I was a divorce mediator, yes, I was. That was in 2001. The divorce rate was inching towards 50%. It's getting worse. The reason why it's getting worse is because marriage counseling, as it is given to us, has no bearing on marriages. That would be like setting up a clinic to heal wounds without having Band-Aids and Mercurical or stitches. And you go in and the doctor says, so how does it feel? Tell me all about it. And it's like, you're going to bleed to death. And so that's what's happening to marriages when the couple goes to marriage counseling these days. They talk about who's right, who's wrong, why is it getting like this, what can we do, how do we set boundaries, how do we establish better communication, all those things which are not, believe it or not, they're not important. They're certainly not top line. And so what happens is we get married, we have kids, and because marriage counseling fails, the marriage counselors have convinced themselves, they're not mean people or terrible human beings, they convince themselves that the kids are going to be okay. Now, when I started on this project of saving marriages, that was in 2001, the research that I was able to do wasn't convoluted. It was straightforward. There were plenty of studies. And it brought tears to my eyes, what happens to children. And I think the worst one that got to me was the divorce rate for kids who come out of broken homes is so high. It doesn't even make any sense. You know, we see movies about kids who commit suicide because they're doing poorly in school or their boyfriend or girlfriend hates them. But that's not the big thing. The big thing is that kids commit suicide because they're left unattended. You see, when you have a family, a two-parent household, you have 4 eyes looking at all the kids. 2 from a male point of view, 2 from a female point of view. And so these kids are under constant scrutiny, which means if they're starting to veer off a path that is positive for them, the parents are aware. They know about it. They take care of the kids. Once you start down that road of divorce, your life is taken over. And it's horrible. You see, the whole divorce industry is about making money. It's not about making you happy. And so what happens is it's a huge distraction. Think about it. The first thing the lawyer wants to know is how much money is there? What are the assets? And then it causes fear, stress, uncertainty, and it's a disaster for the parents, both of them. Now, I'm not going to get into this too much because that's not what this video is all about. But it's important to realize this. Your kids will not do well. So if you have kids, do not get a divorce. It's very simple. I mean, yes, if there is violence going on, and I don't mean that one of you hit the other one day out of anger. I'm talking about real violence. Okay, you have to get away. But in 99% of the cases, don't. Now, years ago, a friend of mine's wife called me and said, Paul, I am really thinking about getting a divorce. And I wonder if you could tell me what's it going to do to the kids. And I said, great question. And the answer is, don't do it. Just wait. Well, guess what? Not only did they wait, but she read one of my books. And to this day, they're still together. Now, that was back in, I think it was 2012 or something. So the problems that you have are caused by, and here's where we get to point 2. So point 1 is if you have kids, just simply remove that option of divorce. Take it off the table. Just don't do it. Now, 2, and again, we're not talking about fighting for your marriage by, we're talking about taking practical steps, not to save your marriage. Honestly, that's pretty easy. But taking practical steps to turn it back into what it was supposed to be in the first place. I call it the sacred space of marriage, because what is sacred is that which brings us love, happiness, and the sense of well-being. And when your marriage is properly functioning, guess what? That's exactly what you have. So, step 2, before you consider divorce, consider getting a thorough education. And I don't mean from the books you find at the library or in the bookstores these days. They're all sort of trendy and based in Western psychology, which, no offense to the psychologists, I love psychologists because their intention is good, but it doesn't have a lot to do with marriage. Because one of the guidelines for Western psychology is to separate the empirical that which you could see, touch, and feel, from the abstract. And you can't do that with marriage, because what they do is they call love abstract. They call souls abstract. These are abstract thoughts to them. Yet, if you really think about it, you got married because you fell in love. It's the very core principle that should be guiding your marriage. So all of their rules, all of their guidance is pretty much meaningless. I did a deep dive. I created teachings for marriage, and they're available to you easily. Now, you could just watch these videos and you'll grasp a lot, but if you really need it, you get one of the books. If your marriage is really on the edge, and it may not be, then you get, if you're a man, the course for men. If you're a woman, the course for women, and you get straightened out. Not where you're going to get beaten up and put back on the path, but where you're shown step by step common sense, logic, and love. You know, people always wonder what's the highest wisdom, because we all want to behave in a way that is wise. Love is the highest wisdom. And your marriage should be based in love. Your action should be predicated by love. Your reactions, usually predicated by the mind's defensive systems, should be predicated on love too. So, point number 2 is, until you get a proper education, not ask yourself, do I need that? I'm telling you, you do. You need a proper education. Until you get that proper education, you're wearing weights as you walk into the pond to go swimming. You're just going to get sucked down. You need to know how to float. What just came to my mind is, when you're running your marriage the way it's meant to be run, you do float. You float in that love and joy that marriage creates. Okay, number 3. Now we're getting into sort of the mundane. So the third point is to consider this. If you get a divorce, are you really understanding that at a minimum, it's half of you who doesn't know how to be married? And so if you think, well, I'll divorce him or I'll divorce her and I'll find someone who is more my soulmate, or whatever nonsense your mind comes up with, it isn't going to work. When I was a divorce mediator, literally I worked with people who were getting their 3rd divorce. You know, they were proud of themselves that now they could do it without going through the courts. We'll just use a mediator because there's no kids anymore, and we'll just work through all of the things according to law and blah, blah, blah. And so the point is this, what I'm driving at is that until you know how to be married, you're just going to jump from one frying pan into another. Now, you're not going to jump into the second frying pan without all of the romantic interval and stuff, but you're not going to be with anyone better. Because we attract people according to who we are. We fall in love with people according to who they are and how we see them. So if you don't change, if you're the same person, you're just going to end up marrying the same person in a different form. Different coat of paint, same form. So that's number 3. Okay? Now, are there more points? Yeah. So number 4, again, this is kind of mundane, not quite as deep as the previous one. And that is, do you really want to go through all that again? Do you want to go through the risk of having a tough marriage? Forget all the crap you're going to go through between now and when the divorce is final. You have no idea, but you're going to go through this again and again. It's just the way it works. So I'm going to leave you with those 4 points, but I'm going to go into now the alternative to divorce, because Walk away or get a divorce? No, walk towards. Do some things right now that you know for certain is going to help your marriage. I'm going to give you some do's and don'ts. One do and don't is change your attitude towards them. You know, your attitude has grown out of seeing them in a particular way, not by how they behave so much, but by how you see their behavior. You know, do this test. You know how some people find fault with a friend of yours and you don't see it? There's a great example of what's going on. We see people through our eyes that are tainted. So stop doing that and start seeing your wife or your husband the way you saw them when you first got married. Now that's the first step. I'll be honest with you. Some people go, that makes total sense. That's what I'm going to do. Everything's going to be all right. It's not going to be all right any more than getting the first driver's lesson when you get behind the wheel and you're told that the wheel is to turn the car and the pedal is to make it go and this button is to turn on the radio. You need all the knowledge, all the information. Why? Because what you are shooting for, what you should be demanding, what you should be expecting very positively, and I'm telling you that it's achievable, you should be expecting a marriage that just makes your eyes flutter, makes your heart open, makes your day amazing. You wake up with a smile, you go to bed with a smile, you're floating because you feel the happiness that's coming from love, right? What's marriage all about? Marriage is all about learning how to love unconditionally. That's what it's all about. It's so simple. You see, it's not natural for us to love unconditionally, or we would love everyone we see. But we have free will. We have volition. We have to learn how to use these to our advantage. What does that mean to our advantage? Not to get more. Our advantage is always moving towards happiness, moving towards love. Don't give up. Don't walk away. Start on the right path. You came here for a reason. Now start on the right path towards ever-fulfilling joy, happiness, and love. You can do it. I'm Paul Friedman. If you're here for the first time, then I'm glad, and maybe you'll subscribe and see more of these videos. If you've seen 100 of these videos, I'm very grateful for when you hit the like button, and I want to see you again. And by the way, if you have a particular problem you would like some help with, we have a free service. It's called Ask a Counselor. The link is down below. Click on it. They'll help you. All of these marriage counselors are trained by me, and that makes a huge difference. I am telling you the truth. God bless you. Thank you for stopping by. See you again. Take care.